Admiral Hyunwoo stretched his clawed hands and looked out at the massive fleet surrounding his command ship. 847 warships floated in perfect lines through the darkness of space, their weapons ready and engines humming with power. The sight always filled him with pride. This was the Draconian Empire's third battle fleet, the most feared military force in the entire galaxy. For 300 years, no enemy had ever defeated them. Today would be just another easy victory to add to their long list of conquered worlds. Hyunwoo's reptilian eyes studied the holographic display showing their target. Earth looked so small and helpless, a blue and green marble spinning slowly in the void. The intelligence reports made this mission sound almost boring. These humans had only recently figured out how to build basic rockets. They had barely managed to put a few primitive satellites around their own planet. Some of them had even walked on their small moon, but that was about as advanced as they got. Compared to the Draconian Empire's technology, these Earth creatures were like children playing with sticks and stones. "Sir, all ships are in position," reported Commander Jiho from the communications station. His voice carried the same confidence that filled every Draconian warrior. Why wouldn't it? They had conquered over 200 worlds using the exact same tactics. Hyunwoo nodded slowly, his scaled skin catching the blue light from the control panels. He had personally led 43 successful invasions during his career. The process was always the same, and always worked perfectly. First, they would surround the target planet with overwhelming force. Then they would broadcast their surrender demands in every language the primitive species could understand. Most civilizations immediately gave up when they saw the massive fleet. The few that tried to fight never lasted more than a few hours. "Begin. Standard conquest protocols," Hyunwoo commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge. His fingers moved across the tactical display, highlighting different sections of the human planet. "Broadcast surrender demands on all frequencies. Make sure they understand what happens to worlds that refuse to cooperate." The communications officer began transmitting the same message that had brought hundreds of other species to their knees. It was simple and direct. Surrender immediately or face complete destruction. Join the Draconian Empire peacefully or watch your cities burn from orbit. Most species made the smart choice. Through the main viewing screen, Earth hung before them, like a beautiful jewel against the black background of space. The planet's blue oceans and white clouds made it look peaceful and innocent. Hyunwoo had seen many worlds from this distance, and they all looked deceptively calm before the conquest began. The Admiral checked his chronometer. Based on previous invasions, he expected the human leaders to respond within 2 hours. They would probably try to negotiate at first, asking for more time or better terms. Then they would realize they had no choice and formally surrender. Within 6 hours, the most feared military force in known space would add another world to the Empire's growing domain. What actually happened next would shock every civilization in the galaxy and change the balance of power forever. Minister Da-Yun had never felt fear like this before in her entire career. She walked back and forth across the emergency meeting room, her hands shaking as she tried to make sense of what had happened. For over 20 years, she had served on the Galactic Council, dealing with wars, trade disputes, and diplomatic crises. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. The council chamber buzzed with nervous whispers from delegates representing dozens of different alien species. Everyone looked scared and confused. The emergency meeting had been called just 6 hours after the Draconian Third Fleet went completely silent. 847 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy had simply vanished without sending even a single distress signal. "This makes no sense," Da-Yun said, her voice cracking with stress. The Draconian Third Fleet was the most watched military force in known space. We had tracking stations monitoring their every move. Our spy networks followed their communications. Intelligence agencies from 12 different worlds kept detailed records of their activities. Representative Taimin from the Alterian Consortium stood up slowly, his blue-tinted skin looking even paler than usual. His people were known for being calm and logical, but today he seemed just as frightened as everyone else. "Minister, our deep space monitoring stations recorded their final transmission at exactly 1400 hours Galactic Standard Time. It was their typical surrender demand, broadcast on all standard frequencies, then exactly 17 minutes. Later, all communication stopped. The room fell silent. Every delegate understood what this meant. The Draconians always followed the same pattern when conquering new worlds. They would arrive, make their demands, and then either accept surrender or begin bombardment. The fact that everything had gone quiet meant something had gone terribly. Wrong Ambassador Su Jin from the Centauran Republic raised her hand nervously. Has anyone considered that maybe the humans somehow fought back? Perhaps they had hidden weapons or defensive systems that our intelligence missed? Several delegates shook their heads immediately. Impossible, replied General Kyung-ho, the military advisor to the Council. Our scouts have been studying Earth for over 50 years. These humans can barely travel to their own moon. Their most advanced weapons are primitive nuclear devices that they seem too afraid to actually use. They have no space-based defenses whatsoever. The panic in the room grew stronger. If the humans hadn't fought back, then what had happened to the fleet? Some delegates began whispering about ancient alien weapons hidden on Earth. Others wondered if there was some kind of cosmic phenomenon that had destroyed the ships. A few even suggested that the humans might be far more advanced than they appeared, hiding their true capabilities behind a mask of primitive civilization. Meanwhile, their long-range sensors continued picking up Earth's radio transmissions. The humans seemed completely unaware that they had just become the most feared species in the galaxy. Their broadcasts talked about something called weather forecasts, sports games, and music programs. They discussed traffic problems in their cities and advertised products for sale. It was the most normal, boring collection of communications imaginable. How can they be so calm? Whispered Representative Min-ho from the Zephyrian Alliance. The greatest military force in galactic history just disappeared near their planet, and they're talking about whether it might rain tomorrow. The mystery deepened with every passing hour, sending shockwaves of fear throughout every civilized world in the galaxy. Captain So-young rubbed her tired eyes and stared at the sensor display for what felt like the millionth time. 3 weeks had passed since the Draconian fleet disappeared, and she still couldn't find a single trace of what had happened to them. Her small investigation ship floated at the very edge of the Sol system, far enough away to escape quickly if needed, but close enough to scan for clues. The joint investigation fleet had seemed like such a good idea when the Galactic Council first proposed it. They had gathered the best scouts, detectives, and military analysts from 15 different worlds. Each ship carried the most advanced scanning equipment available. If anyone could solve this mystery, it should have been them. But, now sitting in the captain's chair of her ship, So-young felt more confused than ever. Her crew had been working around the clock, running every type of scan imaginable. They had searched for wreckage from destroyed ships, energy traces from massive battles, and radiation signatures from weapon discharges. They had looked for distress, beacons, emergency transmissions, and even tiny pieces of metal floating in space. Lieutenant Wu Jin, run the debris field scan one more time, So-young ordered, though she already knew what the results would be. The young officer's fingers danced across his control panel, initiating the same search pattern they had used dozens, 12 times before. The advanced sensors reached out across millions of kilometers, looking for any sign that a massive space battle had taken place near Earth. After several minutes, Wu Jin shook his head sadly. Still nothing, Captain. No debris fields, no wreckage, no scattered ship parts. The scanners aren't picking up any unusual energy signatures either. No plasma residue from weapons fire, no radiation from exploded reactors. It's like the entire Draconian fleet just vanished into thin air. Science Officer Haewon looked up from her workstation with an equally puzzled expression. Captain, I've been analyzing the gravitational data from the area where the fleet was last detected. If 847 ships had been destroyed, in a battle we should see gravitational echoes from the explosions. The math doesn't lie. There's absolutely no evidence that a massive space engagement occurred anywhere in this system. The mystery deepened every day. How do you make nearly 900 advanced warships disappear without leaving behind even the smallest piece of evidence? It was like trying to hide an entire city and making sure nobody ever found so much as a single brick. While the investigation team struggled with their impossible puzzle, their long-range communication interceptors continued picking up transmissions from Earth. The humans seemed to live completely normal lives, totally unaware that they had somehow become the most feared species in the galaxy. "Listen to this," communications specialist Inho said, playing back some of the intercepted human broadcasts. "They're discussing something called traffic jams, where too many of their ground vehicles get stuck on roads. Another group is talking about grocery shopping and complaining about the prices of food. There's even a transmission about someone's pet animal getting lost." Navigator Yunsu shook her head in disbelief. "These beings eliminated the most powerful military force in known space, and they're worried about finding their lost pets. Either they're the best actors in the universe, or they genuinely have no idea what they've done." The investigation continued, but the answers remained as elusive as smoke in the wind. Dr. Jinnah stood nervously in front of the most brilliant scientific minds in the galaxy, but even she knew her theory sounded completely ridiculous. The Galactic Scientific Committee had gathered experts from 47 different worlds, all desperately trying to explain how a primitive species like humans could make an entire fleet disappear. "What if humans have some kind of hidden mental powers?" she suggested, her voice getting quieter with each word. "Maybe they can project thoughts or create illusions that confused the Draconian commanders. Perhaps the entire fleet experienced mass hallucinations that made them fly their ships into a star or black hole." The committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Dr. Jinnah was one of the galaxy's leading experts on alien psychology, but even she seemed to realize how desperate her explanation sounded. The problem was that every other theory seemed just as unlikely. Committee Chairman Dongwu sighed heavily. "Dr. Jinnah, our deep space scanners would have detected if the fleet had flown into any stellar phenomena. We've checked every star, planet, and cosmic anomaly within 100 light-years of Earth. The ships didn't crash into anything, and they didn't explode. They just stopped existing." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other experts were proposing their own increasingly wild theories. Military analyst Seok Ho had spent weeks developing a presentation about secret human superweapons. He theorized that humans had somehow developed technology far beyond what their radio transmissions suggested. "Think about it," Seok Ho explained to a room full of generals and admirals. "What if the humans are deliberately broadcasting primitive communications to make us underestimate them? Maybe they have weapons that can disintegrate matter at the molecular level, leaving no trace behind. Or perhaps they've mastered some form of dimensional technology that can transport entire fleets to another universe." His audience listened politely, but everyone could hear the doubt in his own voice. If humans had such advanced technology, why were they still using primitive rockets to barely reach their own moon? Why did their cities still rely on ground-based transportation and chemical fuel? It made no sense, archaeologist Haye Jin proposed. Yet another theory during a conference on ancient civilizations. "What if Earth was once home to a highly advanced alien species?" she suggested. "Maybe these ancient beings left behind powerful defensive systems that activate automatically when the planet is threatened. The humans might not even know these artifacts exist." Her theory gained some support from other researchers who pointed out that many worlds contained ruins from long-dead civilizations. But again, the evidence didn't match the explanation. If ancient defense systems had destroyed the Draconian fleet, surely there would be some trace of the weapons being fired. As weeks passed, the theories became more and more desperate. Some scientists suggested that humans were actually time travelers from the future. Others proposed that Earth existed in a pocket dimension where normal physics didn't apply. A few even theorized that the entire human species consisted of shape-shifting aliens pretending to be primitive. The Galactic Council increased the reward for information about the missing fleet to astronomical levels. Entire star systems offered their wealth to anyone who could solve the mystery. But despite the massive incentives, the investigation teams remained frozen with fear at the edge of the Sol system. Nobody wanted to risk becoming the next mysterious disappearance by getting too close to whatever force had effortlessly eliminated the galaxy's most feared military power. Ambassador Jae-sung gripped the control stick of his small diplomatic ship so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he guided the vessel through the outer edges of the Sol system. moving closer to Earth than any alien had dared to venture since the Draconian fleet vanished. The Centauran Republic had chosen him for this mission because of his experience with dangerous first contact situations. Over his 30-year career, he had successfully negotiated with warrior species, hive minds, and even energy beings that existed as pure thought. But none of those encounters had terrified him as much as approaching the mysterious world that had somehow made nearly 900 warships disappear without a trace. His diplomatic vessel was small and clearly marked with peaceful symbols from dozens of different civilizations. The ship carried no weapons and broadcast friendship messages on every known frequency. If the humans decided to destroy him, there was absolutely nothing he could do to defend himself. But someone had to make contact eventually, and the Galactic Council had finally run out of patience with long-distance observations. As his ship entered Earth's solar system, Jae-sung activated all his recording equipment. If something terrible happened to him, at least his final transmissions might provide clues about how the humans eliminated their enemies. His hands shook as he adjusted the communication settings, preparing to send the standard diplomatic greeting that had worked with hundreds of other species. Then something completely unexpected happened. Before he could even announce his presence, the humans detected his ship and contacted him first. His communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission, and Jae-sung braced himself for threats, demands, or ominous warnings about trespassing in human space. Instead, a pleasant female voice filled his ship's cabin. "Unknown vessel. This is Seoul Control Tower. We're tracking your approach to Earth airspace. Please state your intentions and destination. Do you require landing assistance?" Jae-sung stared at his communication panel in complete shock. The voice sounded so normal, so friendly, so utterly mundane. The human didn't sound like a member of a species that had just eliminated the galaxy's most feared military force. She sounded like someone offering to help a lost traveler find directions. Did you just offer me landing assistance?" Jae-sung stammered into his microphone, barely able to believe what he had heard. "That's correct," the voice replied, cheerfully. "We have several suitable landing sites prepared for extraterrestrial visitors. Would you prefer a location near our capital city, or would you be more comfortable at one of our research facilities? We also have medical facilities standing by in case your species has different atmospheric requirements." The ambassador felt his heart racing. These were supposed to be the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, and they were asking about his atmospheric requirements. They sounded more like helpful customer service representatives than terrifying alien destroyers. I am Ambassador Jae-sung of the Centauran Republic," he managed to say. "I come seeking peaceful diplomatic contact with your species." "Oh, how wonderful," the voice exclaimed with genuine excitement. "We've been hoping for official diplomatic contact ever since we detected that large fleet a few months ago. Please transmit your landing preferences, and we'll have a welcoming committee ready for you. Will you need transportation from the landing site, or does your ship have ground mobility capabilities?" The normalcy of the conversation was far more unsettling than any threat could have been. These were the beings who had made the Draconian Third Fleet vanish completely, and they were asking about ground transportation options. Colonel Minseo poured herself a cup of coffee and settled back in her chair, studying the strange alien visitor across from her. Ambassador Jae-sung looked absolutely terrified, which seemed odd for someone who claimed to be an experienced diplomat. His hands kept shaking, and he kept glancing around the simple conference room as if he expected something terrible to happen at any moment. "So you seem very nervous," Minseo observed, offering him a cup of coffee. "Would you like something to drink? We have tea, water, or various soft drinks available. I'm not sure what your species normally consumes, but we're happy to accommodate." Jae-sung stared at the offered beverage like it might be poisoned. "You're asking about those ships from a few months ago," Minseo continued, pulling up files on her tablet. "Oh yes, we definitely remember them. Quite impressive, actually. 847 vessels, if I recall correctly. They showed up in our solar system, and immediately started broadcasting surrender demands on every frequency we monitor." The ambassador leaned forward so quickly that he nearly fell out of his chair. "What did you do to them?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Minseo looked genuinely confused by the question. Do to them? We didn't do anything to them. They were very polite, actually, once we got past the initial misunderstanding. They seemed to think we would just immediately surrender, which was interesting. But after we explained the proper procedures for that sort of thing, they left. Proper procedures? Jae-sung repeated, his voice cracking with disbelief. Well, yes, Min-seo said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. You can't just show up at someone's planet and demand surrender without following the correct protocols. There are forms to fill out, committees to consult, environmental impact studies to complete. It's quite a complex process, really, the Ambassador's face went completely pale. Forms? You gave them forms? Oh, Lieutenant Dong-hyun handled most of the initial contact, Min-seo explained cheerfully. He's our specialist in extraterrestrial relations. Well, he was before this incident. Anyway, now he's become quite the expert. Would you like to speak with him? I'm sure he'd be happy to explain the whole process in detail. Jae-sung felt his understanding of the universe crumbling around him. The galaxy's most feared military force had been defeated by paperwork? What exactly did Lieutenant Dong-hyun tell them? Min-seo consulted her tablet again. Let me see. He provided them with the standard extraterrestrial contact forms, explained our environmental protection requirements, and scheduled them for hearings with the appropriate committees. He was very thorough. The Admiral seemed quite frustrated by the whole thing, but Dong-hyun assured him that following proper procedures would make everything much smoother in the long run. And then what happened? Jae-sung asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. They left, Min-seo said simply. The Admiral said something about needing to consult with his superiors about what did he call it? The bureaucratic requirements. We gave them copies of all the necessary forms and our contact information for scheduling the required hearings. We're still waiting for them to get back to us, actually. The ambassador realized that the galaxy's worst fears were about to be confirmed in the most mundane way possible. The Draconian Third Fleet hadn't been destroyed by superweapons or ancient alien technology. They had been defeated by the most human thing imaginable, an impossibly complex bureaucratic process designed to turn even the simplest task into a nightmare of paperwork and committee meetings. Would you like to see the forms? Min-seo offered. Helpfully. Lieutenant Dong-hyun practically bounced in his chair as he opened his computer files, clearly excited to finally have someone who wanted to hear about his greatest professional accomplishment. His eyes lit up as he scrolled through dozens of digital folders, each one carefully labeled and organized with the precision of someone who truly loved paperwork. Oh, this was such an interesting case, he said, pulling up a thick digital file. Labeled Extraterrestrial Military Contact, Case DAV-001. You know, we'd been preparing for possible alien contact for years, but nobody expected our first visitors to be so aggressive. The aliens seemed genuinely shocked that we had proper procedures for this sort of thing. Ambassador Jae-sung watched in growing horror as Dong-hyun opened form after form on his computer screen. Each document looked incredibly complex, with multiple pages of tiny text, signature requirements, and cross-references to other forms. You actually gave these to the Draconian fleet? Of course, Dong-hyun replied cheerfully. I mean, they showed up demanding our immediate surrender, which was quite rude, really. But I explained that we couldn't just surrender without following the proper legal procedures. That's when I provided them with our standard extraterrestrial contact forms, ECF 2847 through ECF 2891. That's 45 different forms, Jae-sung whispered, doing the math in his head. 45 basic forms, yes, Dong-hyun corrected him. But each form has several subsections, and many of them require additional supporting documentation. Form ECF 2851, for example, requires a detailed environmental impact assessment. Any military operation affecting more than 100 square kilometers needs a full 6-month review period by our Environmental Protection Agency. The ambassador felt his species' understanding of warfare crumbling before his eyes. Environmental impact hearings? For an invasion? Dong-hyun nodded earnestly, pulling up another set of documents. Oh yes, it's quite important. We have to consider the effect on local wildlife, air quality, water systems, and soil composition. Plus, there's noise pollution from weapons fire and spacecraft engines. The Admiral seemed very frustrated when I explained that all combat operations need pre-approval from the Environmental Protection Agency, the Wildlife Conservation Board, and the Noise Ordinance Compliance Office. "What else did you tell them?" Jae-sung asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "Well, there's also the Interplanetary Relations Committee, which handles all diplomatic contacts with foreign species. They need at least 90 days to review any formal surrender agreements. Then there's the Cultural Preservation Board, which has to ensure that any occupation doesn't interfere with our historical sites or traditional practices. And of course, the Immigration and Customs Office needs to process entry visas for all 847 ships and their crews." Dong-hyun pulled up a complex flowchart showing the approval process. I created this helpful diagram for the Admiral, showing how the whole process works. First, they submit the initial application forms. Then, there's a 30-day public comment period where Earth citizens can voice their opinions. After that, we have committee hearings, impact assessments, and regulatory reviews. The whole process typically takes between 18 and 24 months, assuming no appeals or complications. "The Admiral's reaction?" Jae-sung asked weakly. "He kept asking if there was a faster way to do things." Dong-hyun chuckled. I explained that we do have an expedited process for emergency situations, but that still requires a minimum of 6 months and significantly higher filing fees. He seemed quite upset about the fees, actually. I think he was expecting the invasion to be free. The galaxy's most feared military force had been defeated by the most human thing imaginable. Bureaucracy so complex that it could make even galactic conquest impossible. Admiral Hyun-woo sat alone in his private quarters on the Draconian homeworld, staring at a stack of papers that had become the source of his deepest shame. The forms that Lieutenant Dong-hyun had so helpfully provided were spread across his desk, like evidence of the most humiliating military defeat in galactic history. Form ECF 2847, titled Application for Hostile Military Action Against Inhabited Worlds, mocked him with its 47 pages of impossible requirements. He picked up the first page and read it again, even though he had memorized every ridiculous detail. The form required detailed justifications for military action, environmental impact assessments, noise level calculations, and signatures from 14 different human government departments. There were sections asking about parking arrangements for visiting spacecraft, waste disposal procedures for military equipment, and even questions about whether the invading force would be providing their own catering services. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made Hyun-woo quickly shove the forms into a drawer. Commander Yoo-jin entered the room with the nervous expression of someone who had been ordered to deliver bad news to a superior who was already in a terrible mood. "Sir, the High Command has sent another message," Yoo-jin said carefully. "They're demanding your complete report on the Earth operation. Supreme Commander Tal Ron is threatening to launch a full investigation if you don't provide details within the next 24 hours. Hyun-woo's scaled hands clenched into fists. For 3 months he had been avoiding this moment, but he knew it couldn't last forever. The cover story about a classified military loss had bought him time, but now the entire Draconian leadership wanted answers. How could he possibly explain what had really happened? "Commander, what would you do if I told you that our fleet retreated because the humans asked us to fill out paperwork?" Hyun-woo asked quietly. Yoo-jin blinked in confusion. "Sir, I don't understand." "The humans didn't fight us," Hyun-woo continued, his voice growing bitter. "They didn't use superweapons or ancient alien technology. They gave us forms to fill out. They explained that we needed to schedule our invasion during appropriate business hours because their government offices close at 5 o'clock. They asked us to provide proof of adequate parking arrangements for 847 spacecraft." The commander's jaw dropped open. You're joking, right, sir?" Hyun-woo pulled the forms back out of his drawer and spread them across his desk. "Does this look like a joke to you? Form ECF 2851 requires a 6-month environmental impact study before any military action can begin. Form ECF 2863 demands that we submit detailed plans for cleaning up after ourselves, including proper disposal of any destroyed buildings or vehicles. Form ECF 2875 asks us to provide references from our 3 most recent successful invasions." Eugene stared at the papers in complete disbelief. They wanted references from previous invasions? The human lieutenant was very helpful about it, Hyunwoo said sarcastically. He explained that they needed to verify our experience level before approving our application. He also mentioned that first-time invaders usually get rejected unless they can demonstrate proper training and certification. The two Draconian officers sat in stunned silence, contemplating the impossible situation they found themselves in. The galaxy's most feared military force had been defeated not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by a bureaucratic system so complex that it made galactic conquest literally impossible to complete within a reasonable time frame. What? Are we going to tell the High Command? Eugene asked weakly. Hyunwoo looked at the forms again, knowing that the truth would destroy his career and possibly lead to his execution for incompetence, but the alternative was letting the galaxy continue living in terror of a threat that existed only in their imagination. 6 months after the truth about the Draconian fleet became public knowledge, the entire galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Earth, once considered a primitive backwater world, had suddenly become the most important planet in known space, not because of advanced weapons or superior technology, but because humanity had accidentally discovered the most effective peacekeeping method in galactic history. The Galactic Council had made the unprecedented decision to relocate their headquarters from the neutral space station Harmony Point to Geneva, Switzerland. The move had shocked diplomatic circles throughout the galaxy, but the results spoke for themselves. Under human management, interstellar conflicts that had raged for decades were being resolved faster than ever before. Secretary General Yoon-ji stood at the podium in the newly constructed Galactic Assembly Hall, addressing representatives from over 300 different species. Her crisp business suit and professional demeanor had become symbols of the new galactic order, where efficiency and proper procedure ruled over military might and political intimidation. "Good morning, distinguished delegates," she announced, consulting her perfectly organized tablet. "We have several items on today's agenda. The Zephyrian-Alterian border conflict has been assigned case number GC4829. Both parties have exactly 60 days to complete forms IDR 301 through IDR 318 before we can schedule preliminary mediation hearings." In the audience, Ambassador Kethron of the Zephyrian Alliance raised his hand nervously. His species had been fighting with the Alterians for over 2 centuries, but now he found himself more afraid of missing a filing deadline than losing a space battle. "Secretary General, what happens if we need additional time to complete the documentation?" "Extension requests require Form EXT45, Yoon-ji replied without missing a beat. "However, extensions are only granted for legitimate circumstances, and you'll need to provide supporting evidence for any delays. I recommend starting the paperwork immediately to avoid complications." The Alterian representative quickly began taking notes, clearly terrified of being unprepared for the bureaucratic requirements. What had once been a military conflict involving massive fleets and planetary bombardments had been reduced to a contest of who could file their forms more efficiently. In the back of the chamber, former Admiral Hyunwoo watched the proceedings with a mixture of admiration and horror. After the truth about the Draconian fleet's retreat became public, he had been demoted and reassigned to a new position that didn't officially exist until humans invented it: military liaison for administrative compliance. His job was to help other military forces understand how to properly interact with human bureaucratic systems. It was, without question, the most humiliating assignment in Draconian military history, but it was also the most important job in the galaxy. Every major power now recognized that traditional warfare had become obsolete. Why risk massive casualties in battle when you could simply bog down your enemies in paperwork until they gave up in frustration? "Next item," Yoon-ji continued, "the Crystalline Confederacy's mining rights dispute, case number GC4830. Please note that all resource extraction applications now require environmental impact assessments, indigenous rights consultations, and wildlife protection certifications. The complete application package consists of forms Min-101 through Min-847. A collective groan went up from the crystalline delegates. 847 forms for a simple mining permit seemed excessive, but nobody dared complain too loudly. Earth's reputation for making entire military fleets disappear through administrative procedures had made bureaucratic compliance a matter of galactic survival. Hyun-woo opened his official tablet and updated the Draconian Empire's military doctrine. The new section read, Administrative Warfare Extreme Threat Level. Humans possess the ability to end conflicts through procedural complexity. All military operations involving human-controlled space require proper documentation. Approach with properly completed forms only. Failure to follow administrative protocols may result in indefinite delays and possible retreat due to paperwork. Complications. The galaxy had found peace at last, buried under an avalanche of forms, committees, and filing deadlines that made war too complicated to bother with.